Hey, this is Reese at Homework Made Simple, bringing you the Mini Medical School series, and today's lecture has to do with learning to read EKGs. So the outline for today's lecture will be understanding heart anatomy and circulation, understanding what depolarization means and how it occurs in the heart, looking at deflections on an EKG, and understanding the basic waves patterns seen in the EKG. Understanding these basic concepts will help you tackle any complicated EKG. And let's first go on to heart anatomy and circulation. So before we can tackle an EKG, we need to understand the basic heart anatomy. Now, the point of the heart is to provide circulation of blood to the rest of the body. So let's begin with blood circulation. We have venous blood coming from the inferior and superior vena cavas into the right atrium. So superior vena cava and the inferior vena cava supply venous blood to the right atrium. From there, the blood passes through the tricuspid valve into the right ventricle. The right ventricle pushes blood out into the pulmonary artery past the pulmonary valve. Once in the pulmonary arteries, it circulates past the lungs, becomes oxygenated, comes back through the pulmonary veins. And the pulmonary veins in this picture are a little bit hidden, but when the blood comes back through the pulmonary veins, it enters into the left atrium. So pulmonary veins, blood enters through them into the left atrium. From the left atrium, blood passes through the mitral valve into the left ventricle. And finally, from the left ventricle, blood passes out into the aorta and into the coronary circulation, or the arteries of the heart. Now that was the basic circulation that occurs from the right atrium through to the left ventricle out to the aorta. But to understand how it occurs, you need to understand the electrical discharges that are taking place that let the muscles contract in the heart. So first, we need to focus on one node called the SA node, sinoatrial node. It is the main pacemaker, or sets the heart rhythm for the entire heart. We won't go into nervous system activity in the SA node and everything, but just know it's a pacemaker of the heart. It sends out depolarizations, and first depolarizes both the right and left atria. From the initial discharge, the electrical depolarization passes to the next node, called the AV node, or atrioventricular node. Here, it slightly pauses, but then passes the depolarization down into the ventricles through a branch called the bundle of His. The bundle of His is like the highway from the atria to the ventricles. Once bundle of His is depolarized, it passes the discharge to both the right and left ventricles. It's important to note the right ventricle muscle is a lot smaller than the left ventricle muscle. So it will take a little bit more time for the left ventricle to depolarize before the right. At the same time, the net charge in the heart will be towards the left ventricle because there's greater mass in the left ventricle and there's more depolarization taking place. Now that's the basic depolarization. Make sure to read up about this in your EKG books to get further details, but that's kind of the basic idea behind all this. Next, we will talk about coronary circulation. So next we'll talk about the coronary artery circulation. It's really important to understand the EKGs because if you see a heart attack that is represented on EKG, you need to know what artery is being affected. So first off, the coronary arteries include the right coronary artery and the left coronary artery. They have multiple branches and supply different areas of the heart. The right coronary artery and left coronary artery come from just above the origin of the aorta from the left ventricle and are supplied with arterial blood through the aorta. So the right coronary artery wraps around the right side of the heart, and it supplies multiple portions of the heart, including the right ventricle, the AV node, part of the ventricular septum, posterior and inferior walls of the left ventricle. The left coronary artery again originates from just above the origin of the aorta, has two major branches, the left anterior descending and the circumflex artery. The left anterior descending artery wraps around the front of the heart, and it supplies the anterior wall of the left ventricle, the anterior portion of the septum, and the lateral wall of the left ventricle. These are the three main components the left anterior descending supplies. Next is the circumflex branch, which wraps around the back and side of the heart, actually wraps around all the way to the back, supplying two major things: the left atrium and the posterior and lateral walls of the left ventricle. This is the main circulation of the coronary arteries. There are other branches that will become more apparent when you learn more advanced EKG readings, such as the posterior descending artery and the obtuse marginal artery, which can also become clotted off and cause heart attacks or MIs. But we won't address those at this time. Next, we will look at the different leads that help create an EKG by recording voltages and direction of that voltage in the heart.